Chapter 19 of Revolution and Counter-Revolution, or Germany in 1848. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Revolution and Counter-Revolution, or Germany in 1848, by Karl Marx. Chapter 19. The Close of the Insurrection. October 23, 1852. While the south and west of Germany was in open insurrection, and while it took the governments from the first openings of hostilities at Dresden to the capitulation of Rastatt rather more than 10 weeks to stifle this final blazing up of the first German Revolution, the National Assembly disappeared from the political theatre without any notice being taken of its exit. We left this august body at Frankfurt, perplexed by the insolent attacks of the governments upon its dignity, by the impotency and treacherous listlessness of the central power it had itself created, by the risings of the petty trading class for its defence, and of the working class for a more revolutionary ultimate end. Desolation and despair reigned supreme among its members. Events had at once assumed such a definite and decisive shape that in a few days the illusions of these learned legislators as to their real power and influence were entirely broken down. The Conservatives, at the signal given by the governments, had already retired from a body which henceforth could not exist any longer, except in defiance of the constituted authorities. The Liberals gave the matter up in utter discomfiture. They too threw up their commissions as representatives. Honourable gentlemen decamped by hundreds. From 800 or 900 members the number had dwindled down so rapidly that now 150, and a few days after 100, were declared a quorum. And even these were difficult to muster, although the whole of the Democratic party remained. The course to be followed by the remnants of a Parliament was plain enough. They had only to take their stand openly and decidedly with the insurrection, to give it thereby whatever strength legality could confer upon it, while they themselves at once acquired an army for their own defence. They had to summon the central power to stop all hostilities at once, and if, as could be foreseen, this power neither could nor would do so, to depose it at once and put another more energetic government in its place. If insurgent troops could not be brought to Frankfurt, which in the beginning, when the state governments were little prepared and still hesitating, might have been easily done, then the Assembly could have adjourned at once to the very centre of the insurgent district. All this done at once and resolutely, not later than the middle or end of May, might have opened chances both for the insurrection and for the National Assembly. But such a determined course was not to be expected from the representatives of German shopocracy. These aspiring statesmen were not at all freed from their illusions. Those members who had lost their fatal belief in the strength and inviolability of the Parliament had already taken to their heels. The Democrats who remained were not so easily induced to give up dreams of power and greatness which they had cherished for a 12-month. True to the course they had hitherto pursued, they shrank back from decisive action until every chance of success, nay, every chance to succumb, with at least the honours of war, had passed away. In order, then, to develop a fictitious, busybody sort of activity, the sheer impotency of which, coupled with its high pretension, could not but excite pity and ridicule, they continued insinuating resolutions, addresses, and requests to an imperial lieutenant who not even noticed them, to ministers who were in open league with the enemy, and when at last William Wolff, member for Striegen, one of the editors of the new Rhenish Gazette, the only really revolutionary man in the whole Assembly, told them that if they meant what they said, they had better give over talking and declare the imperial lieutenant, the chief traitor to the country, an outlaw at once. Then the entire compressed virtuous indignation of these parliamentary gentlemen burst out with an energy which they never found when the government heaped insult after insult upon them. Of course, for Wolff's proposition was the first sensible word spoken within the walls of St. Paul's Church. Of course, for it was the very thing that was to be done, and such plain language going so direct to the purpose could not but insult a set of sentimentalists, who were resolute in nothing but irresolution, and who, too cowardly to act, had once for all made up their minds that in doing nothing they were doing exactly what was to be done. Every word which cleared up, like lightning, the infatuated but intentional nebulosity of their minds, every hint that was adapted to lead them out of the labyrinth where they obstinated themselves to take up as lasting an abode as possible, every clear conception of matters as they actually stood, was of course a crime against the majesty of this sovereign assembly. Shortly after the position of the honourable gentlemen in Frankfurt became untenable, in spite of resolutions, appeals, interpellations, and proclamations, they retreated, but not into the insurgent districts, that would have been too resolute a step. They went to Stuttgart, where the Württemberg government kept up a sort of expectative neutrality. There, at last, they declared the lieutenant of the Empire to have forfeited his power, and elected from their own body a regency of 5. This regency at once proceeded to pass a militia law, which was actually in all due force sent to all the governments of Germany. They, the very enemies of the Assembly, were ordered to levy forces in its defence. Then there was created, on paper of course, an army for the defence of the National Assembly. Divisions, brigades, regiments, batteries, everything was regulated and ordained. Nothing was wanted but reality, for that army, of course, was never called into existence. One last scheme offered itself to the General Assembly. The democratic population from all parts of the country sent deputations to place itself at the disposal of the Parliament, and to urge it on to a decisive action. The people, knowing what the intentions of the Württemberg government were, implored the National Assembly to force that government into an open and active participation with their insurgent neighbours. But no, the National Assembly, in going to Stuttgart, had delivered itself up to the tender mercies of the Württemberg government. The members knew it, and repressed the agitation among the people. They thus lost the last remnant of influence which they might yet have retained. They earned the contempt they deserved, and the imperial lieutenant put a stop to the democratic farce by shutting up, on the 18th of June, 1849, the room where the Parliament met, and by ordering the members of the Regency to leave the country. Next they went to Baden, into the camp of the insurrection. But there they were now useless. Nobody noticed them. The Regency, however, in the name of the sovereign German people, continued to save the country by its exertions. It made an attempt to get recognized by foreign powers, by delivering passports to anybody who would accept of them. It issued proclamations, and sent commissioners to insurge those very districts of Württemberg whose active assistance it had refused when it was yet time. Of course, without effect. We have now under our eye an original report sent to the Regency by one of these commissioners, Herr Rüssler, member for Oels, the contents of which are rather characteristic. It is dated Stuttgart, June 30, 1849. After describing the adventures of half a dozen of these commissioners in a resultless search for cash, he gives a series of excuses for not having yet gone to his post, and then delivers himself of a most weighty argument respecting possible differences between Prussia, Austria, Bavaria, and Württemberg, with their possible consequences. After having fully considered this, he comes, however, to the conclusion that there is no more chance. Next, he proposes to establish relays of trustworthy men for the conveyance of intelligence, and a system of espionage as to the intentions of the Württemberg ministry and the movements of the troops. This letter never reached its address, for when it was written, the Regency had already passed entirely into the foreign department, viz. Switzerland, and while poor Herr Rüssler troubled his head about the intentions of the formidable ministry of a sixth-rate kingdom, 100,000 Prussian, Bavarian, and Hessian soldiers had already settled the whole affair in the last battle under the walls of Rastatt. Thus vanished the German Parliament, and with it the first and last creation of the Revolution. Its convocation had been the first evidence that there actually had been a revolution in January, and it existed as long as this. The first modern German Revolution was not yet brought to a close. chosen under the influence of the capitalist class by a dismembered, scattered, rural population, for the most part only awaking from the dumbness of feudalism, this Parliament served to bring in one body upon the political arena all the great popular names of 1820 to 1848, and then to utterly ruin them. All the celebrities of middle-class liberalism were here collected. The bourgeoisie expected wonders; it earned shame for itself and its representatives. The industrial and commercial capitalist class were more severely defeated in Germany than in any other country. They were first worsted, broken, expelled from office in every individual state of Germany, and then put to rout, disgraced and hooted in the Central German Parliament. Political liberalism, the rule of the bourgeoisie, be it under a monarchical or republican form of government, is for ever impossible in Germany. In the latter period of its existence, the German Parliament served to disgrace for ever that section which had ever since March, 1848, headed the official opposition, the Democrats representing the interests of the small trading and particularly of the farming class. That class was in May and June, 1849, given a chance to show its means of forming a stable government in Germany. We have seen how it failed, not so much by adverse circumstances as by the actual and continued cowardice in all trying movements that had occurred since the outbreak of the Revolution, by showing in politics the same short-sighted, pusillanimous, wavering spirit which is characteristic of its commercial operations. In May, 1849, it had, by this course, lost the confidence of the real fighting mass of all European insurrections, the working class. But yet it had a fair chance. The German Parliament belonged to it, exclusively, after the reactionists and liberals had withdrawn. The rural population was in its favour. 2/3 of the armies of the smaller states, 1/3 of the Prussian army, the majority of the Prussian Landwehr, reserve or militia, were ready to join it, if it only acted resolutely, and with that courage which is the result of a clear insight into the state of things. But the politicians who led on this class were not more clear-sighted than the host of petty tradesmen which followed them. They proved even to be more infatuated, more ardently attached to delusions voluntarily kept up, more credulous, more incapable of resolutely dealing with facts than the liberals. Their political importance, too, is reduced below the freezing point. But not having actually carried their commonplace principles into execution, they were, under very favourable circumstances, capable of a momentary resurrection, when this last hope was taken from them, just as it was taken from their colleagues of the pure democracy in France by the coup d'état of Louis Bonaparte. The defeat of the South-West German insurrection and the dispersion of the German Parliament bring the history of the first German insurrection to a close. We have now to cast a parting glance upon the victorious members of the counter-revolutionary alliance. We shall do this in our next letter. London, September 24, 1852. End of chapter 19.